Hello and a warm welcome to This Woman's Work, a space where you can hear and read about some amazing women, the fantastic jobs they do and the paths that have led them to where they are today. I'm here today with Fozia. Hi Fozia.
Hello.
I got you off guard there.
I did. Oh my god!
I just simply went in.
What time are we on? Right.
Could you tell the lovely listener what it is you do for a living?
So my name's Fozia. I am the Chief Exec of Magnitude Biosciences. We are a Durham University spin-out. We're a start-up company, and we do testing for medicines and nutraceutical products to help the healthy aging industry.
Healthy aging, interesting. Wow. So, how much of that? I shouldn't ask this question. Is more directed to women then, if it's healthy aging?
It isn't actually. It's more about longevity has become quite a big buzzword of late. Not least because there's quite a few billionaires in Silicon Valley that have realised that they are aging somewhat. So there's been a lot of money that's been thrown into that industry as a whole, and it's not just health. It's about everything that can help facilitate all of us to have a better life later on in our years. So it's not about adding years to your life, it's about adding life,
and it's not necessarily about how you look, it's about how your body
is functioning. So it's about healthy gut, healthy cognition, providing you with more mobility, and just generally. And it's not all focused on age-related diseases, because when I first stepped into the sector, I thought it was very much focused on diseases that are related to aging. And they were like, well, no, actually, it's beyond that. It's about how do we start changing our lifestyles, what products we eat, how we live our lives to kind of, increase that period where we can do more with our life. Because if you think back to our generation, and like I remember as a kid thinking, people that were in their 50s and 60s, they were so old. They're so old. And if you look at people now, I mean, so many people that I know, and my family included, like they're 60 years old and they're running marathons and they're doing exercise. And within my own kind of social circle, I'm like, well, actually, that isn't old anymore.
No.
And if you look at the average age and the life expectancies globally, they're increasing. So really, and if you look at our retirement ages and our pension ages, they're increasing, right? So we better be healthy for a lot longer and be able to work for a lot longer if we need to live for a lot longer, but also be having a healthier life. So it's not, normal to accept that our bodies are going to fall to pieces, because actually you can prevent that. A lot of it's preventative.
Before we go forward, we always go back. So, little Fozia, what were you like as a child, school, college?
I was very quiet, would you believe? Very quiet as a child, very much an introvert. I was a bookworm. I was described as the clever little bookworm. And this is again very stereotypical of South Asian parents. So she's the one that's going to be the doctor.
Right, yeah.
And I was like, and then I performed and I delivered and I am a doctor. So clearly that self-fulfilling prophecy worked. But yeah, I was very quiet as a child. I used to actively avoid sports and outdoors, and I didn't want to learn how to ride a bike. And my parents didn't think that would be a critical life skill. So, she doesn't want to ride a bike. Well, she doesn't. She wants to go read a book. Go read a book.
Yeah.
And my brother and my sister would be outside cycling and stuff, and I'd be inside reading books and stuff. So
are you the oldest?
No, I'm the second. So there's a sister older than me. I'm one of the middle childs.
Right.
So I was always always very studious, always very lost in my own little world. And I think it was probably in my teens or somewhere that I realised I needed to start speaking for myself a little bit. And I don't know when it was. It was certainly, I think, around about the age of about 14 or 15 when I realised I need to start speaking up, or else I'm going to carry on getting walked over.
Okay.
And I had to find my inner voice and my
So did you have quite a nice group of friends at secondary, though? Because let's face it, secondary, I think pretty much everyone I've spoken to, there's been a couple that have really loved throughout all school, but there's most have kind of gone, for whatever reason, bullying, various other things, secondary's hard.
I think secondary is hard. I think I was going back quite a bit. I probably went on quite a journey. Because I think you know, when you're quite studious as a child and you're in all the top sets and stuff, there's always a certain element of bullying. Oh, well, that person's a swot, that person's a geek.
Yeah.
And it was just part of who I was, so I didn't know any different. But I think it is when you do have a good group of friends around you. And it was interesting, actually, my group of friends weren't all from like the top sets or whatever. We were a very mixed ability kind of group of friends.
Just sort of found each other.
Just found each other. Similar kind of cultural backgrounds as well. And I think that helped because I was born in Huddersfield in Yorkshire, and I was about 2 or 3 when my dad bought a business in Scotland, and then we moved to Edinburgh. So we grew up in Edinburgh, and what was interesting about growing up in the 80s in Edinburgh was that it wasn't hugely multicultural. So myself and my siblings were pretty much the only brown kids in the school.
Yeah.
And I think that inadvertently shapes you as a person, as being othered. And feeling different.
And was it a big school? Or?
It wasn't a big, I mean, it was a very good school. I mean, and that's the reason my parents bought the house where they did, because it was a good school.
Yeah.
And it was all about a very, good education. We come to this country to give our children a better start in life. Good education is a very important thing. And it was a great school, but they couldn't help geographically where we were, and that is what it was. And so I remember when we moved back down to Manchester, I was about 10 or 11 at that point, and the reason my mum just never settled in Edinburgh. She just never felt like she belonged. A lot of the family and the roots that we had were around Huddersfield and Manchester, so she's like, well, that's a big city, let's just go back there, down to there. And it was a heck of a lot more multicultural. And I remember just having this instant sense of belonging, of not feeling that I was different. And I think as an adult, I can now recognise that as a teenager, you're hormonal, you're growing, you're feeling things, you're changing physically and mentally and emotionally, that these kind of things actually matter subconsciously more than you realise.
Gosh, yes.
And I remember just instantly that somehow there was a pivot somewhere inside me, and I just became more naturally confident. If I didn't like something, I would point it out, and I would speak up about it. And I was always like that at home. And my mother's always said that to me. She goes, "You were always quietly stubborn.
Right.
There was never something we could make you do if you didn't want to do it. And you might not make a song and dance about it, but you definitely wouldn't do it if you didn't want to."
Okay.
So I've always had that quiet confidence, but that quiet confidence, I think, slowly became louder confidence as you grow up. And I think that's just as you mature and as you realise.
Yourself.
Exactly. I think as you find yourself and find what your path is going to be. I think slowly became a louder voice into my teens and early adulthood.
Okay, so quite clearly did very well at school. I'm just going to go.
Yeah.
And then obviously went on to college, I'm guessing did sciencey.
Yep. So I stayed in Manchester.
Yeah.
I went to Manchester University, and whilst I was on my placement year, I went to a couple of events because it was close to London. We went to this, I think it was called a PhD Careers Fair.
Oh.
And it was one of those big ones held in one of those big exhibition centres in London, and it was really informative. For me, it was eye-opening. I was like, okay, well, there's PhDs, this is how you apply for them, this is how you get funding for it, you can get scholarships and everything. So I came back, applied for a PhD. I got a PhD at the University of Edinburgh in the Medical College, and the requirement was that obviously I needed to pass my degree, and then it was a fully funded one from the Medical Research Council.
Wow.
Decent enough stipend. And yeah.
So does that mean all you'd have still had to fund your accommodation? Or was that all funded? It was fully funded.
I got a salary.
Yeah.
And if you talk about it in today's terms, it's absolute pennies.
Oh yeah. But at least it meant you didn't have the debt of it.
Yeah, it was enough. So it paid for the tuition fees and everything,
Yeah.
and they also paid me a salary, if you like, per month. That was enough for rent and food and bills and things, enough to kind of get by.
Brilliant.
And you were able to supplement that with teaching, which is
Wow.
what I did. And you have to remember, this was all tax free. So I was like, oh, bring in the money. It was quite funny. It was the first time, I had to run my own house, and I had a flatmate and everything. It was quite fun. And all I had to do was basically to get that, secure that funding, was to graduate with a 2-1. And in the end, I got a first, and that was fantastic. I did my PhD in 3 years. I wrote up in 3 months, and just after my 24th birthday, I had a PhD, and I was like, all right, great. This is great. I've got a PhD, and now what? Then I did a bit of travelling, applied for roles and things during my travels, and when came back, and the first week that I came back to the UK, I had 3 interviews lined up.
Wow.
Which was great. The 3 interviews that I had, on day 1 was this big corporate firm. It was actually a tobacco firm. That's where they make scientists into leaders. That's where that one was for us. Because interestingly, they didn't say the company name because they knew people wouldn't apply, which is interesting. So that was.
So you didn't go to their head office then?
No, I went to their R&D site because when the job was advertised, I applied for it, I submitted a CV, and then when people got back in touch with me, they're like, actually, it's with a tobacco firm, and I'm like, oh, okay then.
But you still must have been curious enough to
go. I was just kind of like...
I would be. You just want to know.
I was like, okay, I don't know if this is where I want my career to go, because
you want to know what their stance on it all is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it was 3 interviews in a week. So one was with BAT, one was with Novartis. They're a pharmaceutical company. At the time they were based in Horsham. And then the other one was at a research institute, the NIBSC, which basically it's a National Institute for the Biological Safety of Medicine, biological medicines like insulin and things like that. So insulin and antibodies and vaccines. So they did the safety testing for that, or did the certification for that. And it was 3 very distinctively different places.
Yeah.
One was a massive corporate company, that was a tobacco company, for, making very cash rich. One was a pharmaceutical company, and one was at a research institute. And it was a very interesting experience going to all 3 of those places in the same week. Bearing in mind, I'd just come back from travelling, was very horizontal, very chill, wasn't really that bothered. I was quite happy, slumming it at mum and dad's for a little while longer if I needed to get my
You'd had a heavy...
Yeah, I'd had a heavy for 6 months.
5 years?
Yeah.
Well, no, if you think about it, for 24 at this point, that's 8 from 18. That's 6 years.
Yeah, it's a lot of time of studying, right? So I went there, and luckily enough for me, by the following Monday I had 3 job offers.
Wow.
Which was quite amazing.
I love the fact that you say luckily, other than you deserved 3 job offers, Fozia.
Yeah, and that, but it was just unexpected.
But again, as women, we're like, I'm lucky enough to have 3 job offers. Or you just bossed it.
I smashed it. Yeah, that's right. That's what I did, Michelle. I smashed it, and I got 3 job offers. But I guess I'm saying luckily because I wasn't mentally prepared for it. Like when you're mentally preparing for an interview, and you're swatting up and you're learning about the company. I did absolutely squat. And I think that's why I'm saying it was lucky. Because when you go into an interview, you generally read up on the company or figure out what their MO is and what their vision and thing. My Googling was like an hour before the interview. I better find out what they're all about. And I did that for both of them. And I've got a decent enough memory that I remembered the key facts. So when they asked me about it, I was like, I know you've done this in this country and this in this country. And what's your thought about this? So that was just rapid thinking and learning and talking on the spot. And the decision that I then had to make was which one of these was I going to take. And I was surprised by my gut feel. I wanted to go with a tobacco company.
I was going to say, because surely the curiosity of that.
And the reason was that I remember, and this was purely from a very EQ point of view, I like to think I've got decent EQ, and I listen to my gut quite a lot, because it always tells you something that your rational brain may not always tell you, right? And I remember walking about NIBSC, and I was like, all right, sounds kind of all right, but it sounds a bit too samey.
Right.
And I remember looking at the people, and they looked very much like, it felt like very much like an academic environment.
Very straight.
Very much like an academic environment, not an environment where I thought I would thrive. And then I went to Novartis, and everybody just looked miserable. Like genuinely, there was not a smiling face there. Well, and I remember being at BAT, and it was a full-on assessment centre, so it wasn't just like because the other 2 jobs I had,
so you had to go for like a day.
I had just had like little panel interviews, and then you got shown around, and then you left. Whereas at BAT, I was there for the full day. It was a formal assessment centre. You had a panel interview, you had a tour, you had to do a talk, you had to do an exercise, and it was full on because it was an interview for their graduate training scheme.
Right.
But for the R&D facility, so graduate trainees in R&D, and the plan was that you would be a graduate leader in one of the managerial positions in R&D. And I remember just being on site, and there was just such a vibe. Yeah. People were happy. There was a lot of smiling faces. Yeah. I asked loads of questions. I got the answers that seemed satisfactory. And the other thing that struck out to me was the diversity.
Right.
Like in any one room, there was at least 10 different nationalities. Brilliant. And that really struck home with me, because I hadn't seen that in any of the pharmaceutical companies that I had visited to date at that point. And I was like, this feels like more of an international place. And then I realised, then I did accept that offer. And then when I joined the company, I realised that obviously because it was a global company, secondments was a very commonly accepted thing. Yeah. They had had a presence in 60 countries. I can't remember how many countries they actually had offices in, but quite a lot, and doing a 1-year secondment or a 1-year placement in different offices around the world was a very commonly placed thing. And they would do international assignments, and they would have people coming in from different departments globally to work together on projects. So people
flying in and out.
People were flying in and out. There was cross functionality, and that is where the diversity in thinking came from. And I think for me that set the ground for diversity is really important. And I'm not just talking about ethnic diversity here. I'm talking about age. I'm talking about diversity of thinking.
Yes,
because I think that's one of the things
coming up in these chats with women. Diversity of thought.
It's diversity of thought, because I think whenever we talk about diversity, people very automatically think, "Oh, are you talking about different coloured people,
or like, genders or something,
or something?" And it's like, or abilities even like that. No, it's the diversity of thought, and your diversity of thought comes from who you are as an individual, what your beliefs are, what your thought processes are, what your upbringing has been, what your exposure and your experiences. So it's almost like saying, oh well, everybody from this part of the world think the same, and we know, full stop, that is not accurate.
So how long were you there for then?
So I was at BAT for about 6 or 7 years in the main R&D function, and then they created a spin-out company which was called Nika Ventures, and at that time it was all about electronic cigarettes becoming a thing. Back in 2010 and 2012, something like that. And what was interesting is in all the years that I worked for a tobacco company, I never once touched tobacco. Because I worked in the R&D function, and the R&D function was all about open innovation. Obviously I can't talk about the projects that I worked on, but it was all about open innovation.
Right.
So the conferences that I went to, the training that I had was second to none. It really developed me as an individual, because people are always like, oh, but you're all about pharmaceuticals, and you were like, you're going to go cure cancer, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, and then you worked at a tobacco company. How did that work out? And I was like, it is what it is. I graduated in a recession. I took the best option that was suitable for me, but
also that is a billion dollar industry.
Exactly.
It's so, and in terms of research money, and just money to
do stuff, and that the training that, I mean, at that moment in time, that was the best option for me in my career, and I still stand by that.
Well, also surely, because there's obviously all of the human biology side of that that relates to it, but there's got to be a load of psychology that relates to it as well. So it's probably more than, like I say, one of those other roles might have just been very much about,
this is the box that you will live in.
The biology side of it, and that whatever, you know what I mean, for one of them. Sorry, everyone, for my crude terminology here. But so much of smoking is psychological, isn't it? And tobacco industry is very much psychological.
And there was so much research being done into that. And I think for me it was quite informative. But also from learning different skill sets. From day one, I was never put into a box. I was on a graduate trainee scheme, so I was rotated around different departments, but that just became the norm then. I would work on cross-functional teams, I would lead cross-functional projects, they would be global. 1 month I'd be in China, the next I'd be in America, the next I'd be in Switzerland. And for somebody who just graduated, it was just me. My other half, he was still finishing his PhD in Edinburgh, so I was just essentially young, free and independent.
Oh my gosh.
It didn't matter where I was in the world, and I think I really relished that freedom. It was fantastic. Travelled quite a lot. And then by the time I got to Nika Ventures, we were getting married, and that was in London. And then I joined that spin out there, and then we moved to London. And I think it just got to the point where we as a family were like very ready to leave London. And I always tell people this story of an epiphany on a train being 8 months pregnant, but really it was before that. But it just got to the point where I was like, I'd be 8 months pregnant, I'd be getting the commuter train from like Surrey into London. Nobody'd give me a seat, and I'm like, why are we here? Like, his family was in Ireland, mine was in Manchester. I was like, why are we living in London? This is not where we want to raise our family. What are we doing here? And there was movements happening around in the company that I worked in at that time as well. So it just felt like the right time to start making noises. And because I had graduated first, we'd always kind of followed my career around the country. And when I was pregnant with my littlest, my daughter, it was a case of, I said to my husband, I was like, well, okay, you find a job and we'll move. I'll find, my jobs, I've got flexible enough skills that will find something for me.
You were confident enough now when you're...
I was like, one of us had to have that kind of flexibility in their career path, whereas my husband is an academic, and, academic careers come up in university, so you have to go to a place with a university. Whereas I was like, there's companies everywhere, I'll find a job somewhere. And we basically did anywhere but London move.
Brilliant.
And it was right, find a job, we'll go there. And my husband, he got offered the job in Newcastle, and neither of us had ever been to Newcastle. Our knowledge of Newcastle was that's where the train from Edinburgh goes through. And isn't that where the angel thingy is?
Yeah.
Right? And that was it.
Yeah.
That was the knowledge that we had. I remember like 6 months in, we were like, okay, do you know what? We like this. This is nice. It's a big enough city that you've got enough stuff to do.
Newcastle's a good city.
Yeah, it's a big enough city, it's enough to do, but it's small enough in that 15 minutes I'm at the beach, 15 minutes I'm in the city centre, 20 minutes I'm in the middle of nowhere in the countryside in Northumberland. This is amazing. What's not to love?
Yeah.
And the community and the people just felt a lot nicer.
Yeah.
Because I think where we were in Surrey, it was very much... it was on the commuter belt. It was on the it was Surrey. I think it was on the lovely, but it was on the commuter belt. Majority of people that were there for jobs. It was very there was a lot of childcare available. You were paying through your nose for it. There was a lot of nanny culture. I mean, literally, you'd go to baby groups and it was just full of nannies with babies. Yeah. And I'd be like on mat leave, going, all right, I'm going to meet other mums. No, I'm not. I'm going to meet other nannies. And I think we were very kind of ready to leave, but it worked out. And then I think about six months or so months later, then it just made sense for us to make a full-on formal commitment, because we were just renting place. And then once people that I used to work with then realised that I wasn't going to go back to that workplace, the word got round, Fozia's leaving London. And there was a couple of suppliers that I worked with in my last role that I heard, we hear that you're moving north. Yeah. We're north. And I was like, oh no, I'm moving north. I'm moving to Newcastle. You guys are in Leeds. And they called me up and said, look, we are expanding. We've always really liked working with you. We're expanding. Would you like to come and have a chat? And I remember saying this to my husband. I was like, they want me to have a chat, but they're based in like Skipton somewhere. We're in Newcastle. He goes, go and have a chat, see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? And it was interesting conversation. They were expanding their business. They were a CRO, another service provider to pharmaceutical and industry, and obviously the tobacco and nicotine industry, and they did quite a bit of work with cannabinoids as well. And they said, we need to expand our company. We want to start a function that works on regulatory projects, that works on putting together dossiers to the MHRA and to the FDA, focused on firstly nicotine products and then expanding. You've got a very unique skill set in the kind of nicotine industry. Yeah. Would you like to come on board and grow this? So
they'd obviously had this thing that they wanted to do.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you appeared.
I appeared, and they
maybe didn't know how to make that happen or whatever.
And I came on their radar, and they're like, okay, this is the kind of person whose skill sets we need. And I'm like, well, that's all fine and dandy, but you do realise I'm based in Newcastle, and I won't be relocating to Skipton anytime soon. And I've got a young family. Like, at that point, my baby was 1 year old. My son was 3.5. And they're like, well, we think we can make it work. Have you heard of this thing called Zoom? And this is 2019, right? And they're like, have you heard of this thing called Zoom? And I'm like, no, pray tell, what is Zoom?
What is Zoom?
What is Zoom? They're like,
the
oh, it's like
innocence,
isn't it? They're like, oh, it's like WebEx, but way, way better. Yeah. It just works. And it worked. And it worked quite well, because I would have like 2 really focused days in the office, back-to-back meetings.
And would you sit overnight when you were there?
I would, overnight. I'd stay there overnight, or occasionally. Yeah. So I would actually only occasionally do.
You've got young kids as well.
It was. And I'm not going to publicise that so much, but it was lovely to have a nice night's sleep. So I would do that. And, more often than not, it ended up being like one full long day rather than having to do overnighters. Yeah. And then the rest of the time I would work in my home office in Newcastle. Brilliant. Just zooming into stuff, because it was, and I think it was quite... At that time, there was a lot of strategic stuff that needed to be done. I needed to grow a team. I needed to recruit people. I needed to grow the strategy. And that was nicely done kind of remotely. And I mean, like, I grew the team from like 2 or 3 people to about 45 by the time I left. But it got to that point where I think for myself, I just got kind of tired of seeing my colleagues in small squares on the screen. And bearing in mind that we'd been in Newcastle for about 3 years at this point, I had no networks or no idea of the life sciences landscape in the North East, full stop. All of my connections were London, South London based, and abroad. They were global. So I knew people in Germany and America and Switzerland, but I didn't know a Scooby about what was going on in Newcastle and beyond. So I made it a little mission to kind of get to know people. Okay. In Newcastle, I started going out to networking events. I started speaking to people. Brilliant. I started chatting to, because I'd made a lot of like, because I was on mat leave and I did have young children, I made a lot of mum friends from like, you know, the baby groups and Buggy Fit and all these kind of stuff. So I had like a group of friends that I just used to talk about normal life stuff, and then I started talking to them about career stuff. I was like, ladies, help me out here. What is here in Newcastle?
Yeah.
And I was very lucky. I've got a very diverse group of friends, and they were like, oh, well, there's this thing and there's this thing. Have you heard of this person, that person?
It's almost, you know, what industries there, isn't
what
it?
industries were available. And they, you know, it started off from my group of friends, and they just started connecting with me with people. And I had coffees around all the coffee shops around Newcastle with people that I'd never met before. And I still try and do that at least, like, you know, one day a month. I'll go and meet people that I don't know. And for me, it's twofold. It's increasing your own network and understanding who's around, but it's also trying to give back a little bit about what you know as an individual. And I think I'm at that point in my career where that's quite important to me as well. I would like to give back to what I have learned and give back to the community, give back to younger people in their career, other women in their career. And, you know, again, you can't be what you can't see. I think I very much stand by that.
Oh, I like that. That is a T-shirt waiting to happen.
Oh, I'm probably sure it's a T-shirt somewhere, right? I'm pretty sure
I'm
I
going to make it.
But it is true. You can't be what you can't see. And if you think about it, really, it's only been in the last 10 or 15 years where these kind of stories about celebrating female empowerment, about celebrating female leadership, understanding that actually in female-led businesses, female-led startups, you only get a fraction of the funding available to male-led startups. And those statistics are out there now.
Oh my God,
the statistic
don't
is
tell
like
me
2% or something. It's really depressing. But
they get 2% the same funding.
Female-led businesses, female founders get 2% of the VC funding available globally. That's a stat. It's depressing.
I don't know if I want to know that.
I know, it's when you realise that, and like, well, hang on, we're still doing all right.
There's a lot of work to do.
There's a lot of work to do, but the fact is that it's now being spoken about. And recognising the elephant in the room is the first step to doing something about it. So there's been a lot of progression in the last 10 years alone, just being able to talk about it, identify these things as a problem. Only then can we start addressing it. So I think it's, you know, it is important to kind of recognise that and to start addressing that. So yeah, I started going out to all these events and getting to know people, and bearing in mind my background up until this point has been very corporate, very cash-rich companies, very stable careers and stuff. Even in the consultancy firm that I worked with had been around for about 10-15 years, so very stable. And I met up with a local VC firm, and they were like, really got on with them, really liked them. And I was like, well, I'm looking for new opportunities. If you do think of anything, this is my repertoire, these are my skill sets, and I'd really like to feel like I belong to the Northeast. I want to give back to the Northeast because I think it's a fantastic region. I think it is neglected and ignored. So I spoke to one of the VCs, and they were like, have you ever thought about leading a startup? Because we've got a startup that's in need of a commercial leader who can take it to the next stage of growth. And I was like, right, never considered that whatsoever. What's it about? And then I started having chats with the guys here at Magnitude, really liked them, came here for a day, met everybody, and it was interesting. I was like, this is somewhere that I can really add some value. I can have some autonomy here. There's an opportunity here to really shape something.
I know you have a little life in you yet. I know you have a lot of strength left. I know you have a little life in you yet.
And you're very much at the kind of bloody end of innovation. I heard that phrase somewhere, and I was like, that's really true. It's at that very like cutting edge where it can go anywhere.
Yeah. Ooh.
And being able to be in that place, it's exciting, it's novel, it's new. It's also very scary.
Yeah.
You've got all these people's mortgages relying on you, making sure that you can run a company. And I remember when I was being spoken to about Magnitude and stuff, and I had meetings with every single board member separately. So there was no formal interview as such. I just had really long meetings with every single person individually, and it was casual chats, but obviously there were interviews, right? So they were in like coffee shops or over Zoom or whatever, and it went on for about the first time I spoke about this place was March, April, and then I didn't sign a contract till about July.
Oh wow, right.
So,
but then equally you're working full time at the same time, aren't you?
But it was a big decision for them and for me. They were going to bring in a CEO.
Yeah.
And I was going to take on a very new role and take on the responsibilities. I needed to make sure that it was a fit for me and I was a fit for them. So I appreciate the big decision. Yeah. And you would go around the houses for a very significant role like that. So it took a while, and I think it is a big challenge, and I have taken it on, but it is very, very different.
Yeah.
Very, very different to anything I've ever done before, and I'm very lucky that I've got a good team around me, and I've had the flexibility to build and the freedom to build a team around me.
Yeah.
But it's definitely been a learning opportunity.
But if you're very solutions focused and action orientated, that really is quite a CEO mentality, isn't it? It's like, okay, this is where we've got to get to. Yeah. How do we get there? Let's not talk about, we're not going to go off on theories. We're going to get, proper action plans. And is that, because obviously the couple of the questions that I always ask are generally things like, what inherent skills do you think you have that make you quite good at this? And I think I could already tell there's a number that you've got, but I think, from what you've described, just wanting real solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I am very action focused.
Yeah.
I'm all about how are we getting to this? I understand the problem now. What's the solution? What's the pathways to the solution? How are we going to get it? Give me a measurable time. So when you've just said action driven, it's almost like you've been speaking to my team. Because one of the things, very early on in my career, I had a manager. She was fantastic. And she always used to state the so what to me.
Oh.
And it was interesting because I remember I presented, I kind of pride myself on putting together really good slide decks. That is what I do. I don't write publications. I don't write publications anymore. I don't like papers anymore. But I love a good slide deck, right? So I remember I was showing her my first slide deck. We were going, it was a project meeting, and she's like, what's that title mean? I was like, it just says results. She goes, what are the results? So what? I was like, it's in the graph. I was like, that needs to be the headline, Fozia. The so what? The person in the room should read that headline and know exactly what that slide says.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be death by PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. And that, I didn't even realise how much that had become my inside mantra. Yeah. Because I literally say that to my team on a daily basis now. And I'm like, why are you telling me this information?
What are the key bits? Yeah, what's
the
key?
Why do I know? Do I need to know this?
Yeah.
No, if I don't need to know this, you crack on. Come to me if there's a problem. All right, you need to make a decision. Or what's the decision that we're making things on? And it is very action focused, and I do like deadlines. I do like measurable things, because unless my I don't know if this is a character flaw or not, but I work best under deadlines.
Oh.
And I do need under pressure. I need the fear. I need to know that this needs to be done by X amount, otherwise it won't get done. It surprised me how much of a CEO's time is spent looking at numbers and accountancy and balancing the books. Because to me, when I was considering the job, I was like, oh, it's strategic growth, it's expansion, it's marketing,
it's big picture
world
stuff.
Domination, big picture stuff. And I'm like, oh, no, you're going to be stressing about monthly payroll as well. Yeah. And making sure, and we have monthly board meetings. And I remember at the beginning, that was like the bane of my life. But actually, it's really important to keep us on track.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, what are we reporting? What's the month end look like? What does the year end look like? Are we meeting our targets? Are we not meeting our targets? And I think,
because if you're not, you can't do the other stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. One can't happen without the other. And I like to think that that's one of the key things I've brought to the company, is that mentality shift of, we are a business. Yes, we're a university spin-out, but look at us. We are not physically in a university anymore.
No.
And I feel like in the last year, I literally have not stopped.
Because now you're in this, really, the pace is properly going.
The pace is it. Yeah. And it's a running joke at home when we talk about the reason we left London. Because one of the other reasons we left London is that my job was very intense there. I was working in the city, I would work long hours, I was travelling quite a bit, then I put a stop to the travelling, but I was still working in a fairly high pressure role, expected to deliver. And one of the things was like, I would drop my son off to nursery at about 7:30 in the morning, pick him up at about 6:30 in the evening. I'd see him for about an hour and then put him to bed. And I remember thinking, because both my husband and my mum, they were both stay-at-home mums, 100% always at home. And I knew I didn't want to be one of them, but I still wanted to be a present parent.
Yeah.
And I used to have this persistent guilt. And again, I think this is it's certainly in our home, it's a gender-specific thing, because I have mum guilt.
Oh, God,
my husband does not have dad guilt.
No.
He's like, suck it in, they'll be fine. Whereas I'll be like, if I see my child's crying face in the morning, I'll see that for the whole day.
Yes.
Because when I used to drop my son off, and I think a little bit of it is like your precious firstborn, right? when my son was born, and he would like literally cling on to me when I'd drop him off to nursery, and he would cry, and he'd be like, no mama, no, and you know, that lovely little baby voice, and that was it. And I would like be sobbing, dropping him off, and I couldn't get on the train to work, and at work I'd be thinking about it, I'd be calling the nursery, and they're like, he was absolutely fine. 10 minutes after you left, he's playing in the sandpit now, he's doing this, he's doing that. And I couldn't function, and my husband's like, you got to stop dropping him off, I'll do the drop off, you go to work. And it was absolutely fine. And I was like, and he's like, oh yeah, he never does that with me. He goes, and I'd be like, it's because he loves me more. I'm his mummy. But you know, the whole idea of leaving London was that so I would have a better work-life balance. And here we are, you know, 5 years later, and you're like, and my husband's like, do you remember that work-life balance he talked about? Do you remember that bit? He goes, I'm still like doing the heavy lifting, and he's fantastic, and he does do the heavy lifting, and he is my rock, and he has enabled me to have the career that I have. Teamwork, but it's hard, you know. And it's not to say that we don't have our ups and downs, but we both work full time. We don't have any family support. We rely on childminders, we rely on friends, you know. It requires a hell of a lot of life admin. To sort out who's doing what every day of the week, and trying to kind of spend time with the family. And when kids are sick. And when kids are sick, you have to be responsive and be able to do that and be that present parent. As much as I balance it, and you know, it's on me to balance it, but I've never missed a sports day, I've never missed a kids' performance. So, you know, I do prioritise, and they know that they are, my children know they're 100% more important to me, and I will try and make it wherever I can. But, you know, on the flip side, they're seeing a great role model. They're seeing that their mummy is out there, and you know, I was like in the paper once, and there was a few articles and newspapers and things like that, and I showed, I was like, look, that's mummy. And I think it's nice for them to see that, because I talk about feminism at home, and I'll, you know, there was you know, like, as for my children, I want them diversity to be a thing for them. So we're in a multicultural household. My husband's Irish, I'm from Pakistani descent, and it's very important for me that the children see both sides of those cultures. So we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Eid, and they get presents on both sides, and they get Christmas, and they're the most spoiled children in the world. But they're lucky, and they recognise that. And you know, I felt like I'd done half a decent job when once, I think it was last year or something, my son said to me, he goes, oh, we're very lucky, mummy. And I said, why is that? He goes, because when you were little, you only celebrated Eid, and when Daddy was little, he only celebrated Christmas, but we get to do both, so we're very lucky. And I was like, oh, I've succeeded. This is what I wanted the kids. I never wanted them to feel confused or stuck between two cultures. I wanted them to realise this massive, amazing. It's this amazing cultural love fest, and that is what they needed to see. And I never want them to feel like they have to choose between it, or feel like they've ever been. You know, that they're othered or anything like that. And I think that's something that's really important to me, because when we moved to Newcastle, and I like the fact how multicultural it was, because originally when we moved to Newcastle, my friends who were from like North East and stuff, they're like, oh, you know, Ponteland's lovely and Morpeth's lovely, and that's quite nice. And then I went to those places, oh, this is lovely, but they're very white dominant. And I want my kids to know that it's normal to be mixed, and again, diversity of thought, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of thinking, all of that is really important. So that's another reason why I really like Newcastle. What do you think and I don't like the phrase like negative traits, but anything you have that's made your job or your career difficult? I think being a female leader, you're always going to have some element of imposter syndrome. And it's interesting, because I think the career path that I've had, especially starting my career in the tobacco industry, where it was, let's be frank, full of male dinosaurs. Just men, and those that were very set in their thinking as well, that by default I had to be righter than right, surer than sure of what I said. Very, very often I would be the only female, the youngest person, because again, you know, I got my PhD quite young, so I was on the graduate scheme. I was one of the youngest persons on the graduate scheme, and in the end I got fast-tracked off it. It was a 2-year scheme, and I got fast-tracked off it after 10 years, and they gave me a permanent job and a proper project, and that was like, who is this person? And then although it's something to be celebrated, it almost becomes a noose around your neck, because everyone's kind of judging you against that as well. But you know, I'd be the only female, the youngest person, the only person of Asian descent in the room, in like boardrooms, and being very conscious of that, being made to feel very conscious of that as well. And I think that kind of, you try not, as you mature and as you get older, you try not to let it cultivate any of your ways of working, but inherently I think it does.
Yeah.
But I think I'm at that stage in my career.
Almost you over-explain yourself.
Yeah, over-explain yourself. And I think at this point in my career, I call it out very readily. And I genuinely don't care if it makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because even to this day and age, I've had people say to me, "Oh, like, so where are you from?" And that is people don't realise how offensive that term actually is.
Also you don't ask it.
And now I've got to that point where it's like, would you like to know where I live?
Yeah.
Or why I'm brown?
Yeah.
And as soon as you say that to a white person, they get really uncomfortable. They're like, they get the sweats, and I say, "Oh, does that make you uncomfortable?"
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, you've made me uncomfortable.
Yeah, because I'm educating you in what's okay and what's not okay to say.
Yeah.
So I think I call those kind of things out. But yeah, I think imposter syndrome hits hard. There was an article that I read a little while ago, and it said, imposter syndrome is good because that means you're feeling it because you're trying something new.
Yeah.
And by trying something new, you're challenging yourself and giving yourself a new skill set. So don't always think of it as a negative thing. It's just your inner fear coming out because it's something novel and new you've never done before. But isn't that what you want to do? Isn't that ambition and growth? And if I look at myself as an individual, I was like, well, that is what I want to do. I'm not the kind of person that can tread water. I'm not the kind of person that can be stagnant. So that it is... implicitly it's the fear, and the fear is actually a driver, so it's not a negative thing. So you can call it negative, but in reality it's how you spin it into a positive, that these kind of weaknesses that you have, and other skill sets, weaknesses that I have, for me it's all about building the team around me. I'm all about having a team around me that is way better than me. Right? They should always be smarter than me at this and this. I'm going to be a nice little generalist, but
you've got to be as a CEO.
I've got to be the generalist. I've got to be the person who understands enough to be dangerous, enough to get enough people interested, and then I wheel in the expert. I said, and this is your person, this is who you need to speak. But I need to, because I'm leading from the front, I need to have enough knowledge of certain things and enough confidence to be able to speak in certain rooms to get us noticed, to get myself noticed. And I think one of the things that I realised over the last year, that when I'm doing marketing exercises, when I'm doing PR, it's not just PR for the company, it's PR for myself as well. And by default, that raises the PR profile of the company. And we were talking about the North East region, and at a round table, I think it was one of the local VCs that said that phrase, that, as the North East as a region, we need to work together to raise us as a region, because the rising tide will raise all ships. And I'm like, actually, that's a beautiful phrase. I've never heard that before, but I think it's beautiful because it's very, very true.
And it's lovely because it's collective. It's
collective. It's community.
Something bigger. Yeah.
It's united. It's not. We're not adversaries. We're all, in this together.
Just doing our own thing and kind of.
We don't need to be on our own little bubbles. And I think there's not that many companies, certainly startups in the North East, that are directly in competition. Well, they might be in similar spaces, but we're not in direct competition. And even those that are, we do actually work quite collaboratively, because you're stronger together than divided. And I think the more people that realise that, I think the less segregated we'll be as regions as well.
I almost want to end the podcast on that, but I'm not, because I've got 3 more quick questions. We're going to whiz through them. So 1, what's next? Career-wise then, what's next? So you're going to carry on doing this. Where's that going to take you? What's next?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Like I said to you, I mean, my career has always been a process of elimination. Don't fancy that. That. I'll have a chat. I'll have a attempt at that. I'm not sure. I think I love where I am right now. I'd like to take this company from strength to strength, but as a startup, the ultimate plan always is an exit. Yeah. And when you exit, the first person to go is going to be the CEO. Right? But that is success.
Yeah, I know.
Success for me looks like being able to fire myself, basically. Yeah. And I'd like to get it to that point. And at that point, I'm not really sure. I think let's see how I come out of all of this, and how exhausted or inspired I am by this entire journey.
Technically, it could either be another startup.
It could be another startup, or I start...
Rest,
or maybe start doing some more advisory stuff, because I think I really enjoy motivating other people. I really enjoy mentoring and empowerment and everything, and really being that, you can't be what you can't see. And I'd really like to do reach outs into communities and stuff to be able to do that. Before I joined Magnitude, I used to do quite a bit of mentoring and there's an organisation called the Girls Network. And it's all about mentoring girls who are from underprivileged backgrounds, or who wouldn't have the opportunities, usually in their GCSE years in school, and they partner you up with girls in your local schools or whatever. And it's a national programme, and it's fantastic. And the lady that started it off, she's amazing.
2 final questions then. What advice would you give to your younger self? So maybe that quiet...
Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself and be more confident. You're smarter than you think. And I think that feedback, that I think is becoming more normal now. Giving feedback early on to young children, not just young women, to give them the confidence to proceed, to give them the confidence to kind of like, when they're second guessing themselves.
Yeah.
And, it's very delicately done. And I see that with my own kids, that you want to give them that feedback without kind of being patronising, without taking away their learning journey, because you need to fall and learn and get up yourself and dust yourself off and start again to be able to do that. But I think believe in yourself. I think that is probably the advice I'd give to my younger self. Don't be scared. Be confident. Believe in your abilities. Because somewhere out there is a mediocre man thinking he's smashing it.
Every second of every day.
Indeed.
Amazing. Final question then. What is some life advice to throw out into the world for everyone? What life advice would you want to impart? Could be on women or just on anyone.
Oh, well, life advice. I think live your life and don't be afraid of the naysayers is probably life advice that I would give. Because if you constantly start judging your own life plans or visions and stuff based on what other people will think, you're going to get nowhere.
Yeah.
There's always going to be naysayers. But it's easier said than done to ignore those naysayers, because if people say things, they do affect you, they do impact you, but it's don't listen to those that you wouldn't take advice from, I think is probably the key thing. And I think that's how I've learnt over the last few years. If you wouldn't take advice from them, would you take their criticism? No.
Yeah.
Then that means their opinion's not valuable enough.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't go to them for advice, then really they're just not.
Their opinion just
doesn't really matter, because that's always going to happen. It's all, how easy is it to criticise? We know that as humans ourselves, it's just human nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
We'll open up the paper, we'll listen to the news or whatever, and it's so easy to say, oh God, well, they should just do this, shouldn't it? It's so simple. But you don't know what's going on the other side. You don't know what's going on in terms of what else they're dealing with, or what other kind of hurdles and battles people are going through. But follow your truth and do what you can. But try not to be detracted too much about what other people will say or think about you. And there's one phrase actually that my lot now think needs to be on a tote bag is shy bairns getting out.
Say that again.
Shy bairns getting out.
Oh,
it's a very, very Geordie term.
Yeah, it always sounds quite Scottish as well. Shy bairns getting out.
Yeah, I think it was. I moved up to Newcastle and I was in one of the Asda's, and you know where it says baby aisle? It didn't say baby, it said bairn.
Did it?
I took a picture of it and sent it to my friends down south. I was like, look, the baby
Look
aisle
at how
says
my life has
bairn. I'm so
changed.
Geordie, look at me. But it is. I think it's true. I think being shy doesn't get you anywhere, and I guess 14-year-old me realised that.
Yeah.
And started speaking up for herself.
Thank you very much, Fozia.
Oh no, it's been an absolute pleasure.
If you would like to hear more about this chat, see some pics and read about how to get started in this industry and or this role, then please go to our website www.thiswomanswork.org. The link is on this podcast page and across our socials. Sincere thanks.